Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today I just want to spend some time kind of wrapping up this whole saga with the hit on Trevor Lawrence this last Sunday. Week 13 against the Houston Texans, getting knocked out of the game with a pretty nasty concussion on a really bad hit. And the reason why we're talking about this again is because for some reason, this is a controversial subject suddenly. Not really among Jaguars fans, but there are a lot of people out there that are gaslighting into thinking that somehow this was Trevor Lawrence's fault, that there is no blame to go on Azeez, and this is just some big example of the advantage that quarterbacks have, which it is a very poor example of that. But this is where we are. Because, look, I get being partisan as a fan. I get being biased as a fan. I understand that, right? We all tell ourselves every year, it seems, that our team is going to win the division. They're going to win the Super Bowl. That's what fans do. There's a point where it gets too extreme, and we're at that point right now, where it is being celebrated, what happened, by some people out there. And it is not just some, really. It's a lot of people. And it's sad, but I just want to give my final thoughts on this whole thing. You'll also hear later tonight, if any of you guys tune in to the AFC South Roundtable, I will be filling in for UCF Jaguars, so we'll unfortunately have to talk about this again. I'm not looking forward to it. Join if you can, because I am going to be probably outnumbered heavily by Texans fans watching. But just talking about this hit, right? Getting back to that. You've got a 3-game suspension for him. I don't care a ton like how long the suspension is. I'm glad he's suspended. And I hope that this is something that does not happen again. But unfortunately, at the same time, there's going to be potential long-term consequences with this for Jacksonville. Right? You lose Trevor Lawrence, not just for probably next week, the rest of the game that we just played 2 days ago. But now you got to worry about concussions going forward, because you go back to Tua Tagovailoa and what he got in his first hit, or how he looked, right? Same thing, fencing posture, gets hit really hard, bang bang, and the guy is knocked out. And that's where things really started for him. And when he started getting hit more, which, not to try to throw him under the bus, Tua's got to do a better job protecting himself. That's something a lot of people have said. You can see it on film. The guy's got to be careful. He's put himself in a lot of bad situations. He's gotten hit more. And every time it gets worse and worse and worse. And there's a lot of long-term questions with him, to the point where people were asking, like, is he a player that needs to retire at the beginning of this season? So it's scary, right? And I'm not sitting here telling you that this is exactly how things will go. I don't think it will, right? Trevor Lawrence is not someone who puts himself in those situations that often. He's not someone who runs a bunch. So it's just something to monitor more so than to necessarily expect. And unfortunately, that's the long-term consequence of this. As far as the hit, this should not have to be said, but this was not a late slide by Trevor Lawrence. I do not understand why people want to believe it is. He gave himself up about 5 yards before they were going to get together. He was down. You can see his knee down well before Azeez even made contact. And what does Azeez do? He leads with his elbow, his forearm. He has a brace on it. And he goes straight for the head neck area. There was no attempt and no intent for him to miss on that, or for him to avoid Trevor Lawrence when he had given himself up, which defenders are expected to do. It needs to be said. And look, I understand people who have frustration with quarterbacks taking advantage of these rules, and I quite frankly agree with them. However, this is not the example you give. This is not the play that defines the matter. If you want to talk about that, when I call out a guy, you might have heard of him, watch Patrick Mahomes play. Seems like every week you got to run where he's going towards the sideline. He's supposed to go out, or he's supposed to give himself up Defenders loosen up. They don't want to hurt him. They don't want to hit him. What does he do? He runs by him. Did it against Carolina like a week or two ago. He's done it in the past before. It has cost it has cost teams games playing against the Kansas City Chiefs because he takes advantage of the rule to that extent. You can find times where he did fake slides. That's where the issue is. And there should be a conversation around it. And I have my own opinions on that, to where I do think that a lot of the protections that quarterbacks get, I don't know if they should have. And I think they should be more careful in the way they play. I do think defenses get disadvantaged. But at the end of the day, does this apply to that matter? Hell no. It's not even close. But people tell themselves what they want to believe. And unfortunately, more people are telling themselves this because the head coach for the Houston Texans came out yesterday saying that not only was he going to defend Azeez Al-Shaair, which, look, you should defend your player to some extent. I'm not saying you go out there and crucify the guy, run over him 10 times with your car. I'm also not saying that you say he did nothing wrong. But there's a balance, right? There are reasons why he was a captain for that team. There's also reasons why people are frustrated with him because he's done these dirty moves all season, and this is the worst of them. There's a line that you have to follow. There's change that needs to happen. You cannot play games like this because a division game just got destroyed, not yesterday, but 2 days ago because of this. It's not acceptable. But D'Amico, not only just the furthest he went, just to say the word, he called it unfortunate. That is the furthest he could go. Unfortunate what happened because of it. Not that the intent or the action was wrong. It just had an unfortunate consequence. So you don't put any blame on your player. And then he goes into a minute-long rant about how quarterbacks got to learn they can't slide late, they can't mess around with that, and that Trevor needs to learn from this. I agree with the general point that quarterbacks do need to learn that lesson. Trevor's not one of those quarterbacks. This is not that situation at all. We have not seen a hit like this on a quarterback for a very long time. It's not applicable, once again. So he does that, and then not only that, we go even a step further. He says the Jaguars they overreacted too much to it. That the players overreacted. That they should have done nothing when their quarterback got KO'd on the ground in one of the worst hits we've seen in years. Nothing. I'm just going to say the line that everyone's heard in response to this all week because it needs to be said. If that was CJ Stroud, do you think that D'Amico Ryans would seriously want his team to do nothing? Hell no. And if he does, he should be fired. Because that is an awful head coach to genuinely think that your team should have no response to a dirty hit on your quarterback. But of course, he thinks his players are without fault and the Jaguars should just accept it. It's a ridiculous response by him. You heard the general manager earlier today, Nick Caserio, going on about how terrible this was, singing the same tune. And I get some of it, but once again, what the hell are you talking about with this? Because you want to talk about quarterbacks, you want to talk about the consistency of fines, you want to talk about these late slides. This is not the case. This is not fitting to that. Okay? The guy who perpetrated actually did something wrong. Don't pretend that he didn't just because he's on your team. It's disingenuous. And you think about it, what are teams going to think when they play CJ Stroud going forward? It's like, okay, well, I guess I can hit him late because the coach is fine with that. It's terrible. It's stupid. And to flip things the other way for a second, too. Think about Doug Peterson here. What is so crazy about this whole thing and all the comments from the coaches, D'Amico Ryans and Doug Peterson, there have been more negative comments said about what Jacksonville did in this instant by far. Almost basically 100-1. Because instead of saying something definitive about how bad this was, instead of going out to the field when your quarterback got hurt the second it happened or after the brawl or any of that, Doug didn't do that. He just sits there, doesn't know what to say, just doing his little thing where he acts confused, and then just says a couple words, nothing of importance. And then, you know what? Let me talk about how Jarion Jones needs to learn from this. Your own freaking player. I get Jarion Jones got ejected for a reason. He was not on the field. He came out to the field and he threw a punch. I get it. I don't blame him for it. He should have done that. And he should have got the consequences, of course, because those are the consequences. But I still stand by it. That's a situation where you do that. But you're going to go after your own player instead of being upset about the opposing team, your biggest rival, your biggest contender, laying a cheap shot on your quarterback that doesn't rival anything that's happened in recent years. You're more upset by your own player defending your quarterback. It's pathetic. It's weak-minded is what it is. That's your head coach. It's just baffling to me. It's really baffling. And you get all these people who are trying to justify this, trying to make this a big deal about the quarterback slides and teams taking advantage of it, quarterbacks taking advantage of it. This isn't the case. This isn't the perfect example of that or something you should even lump into that. Trevor Lawrence slid in time. He was down well before the contact took place, and Azeez went for his freaking head. It's simple. So there's my rant. It's a frustrating situation. It ultimately ruined what would have probably been another really good game in the Texans-Jaguars rivalry between Lawrence and Stroud. Obviously, first matchup between them last year wasn't close, but you get to the second game, it comes down to what? A missed Texans field goal. It's close most of the way through. One of the best games of last year to watch. This year, yeah, Jacksonville lost, but it's a good game, right? Stroud scores with like 30 seconds left. I mean, these have been good matchups. And both teams got robbed of that because someone had to make a hit like that. And you got the head coaches out here acting as if that's acceptable. Well, the team defending their quarterback, screw that, because we hate Trevor Lawrence for some reason. It's ridiculous. So there's my rant. We'll call it there. We'll probably focus on some other stuff going forward. I don't really want to talk about this too much more. I hate that I even have to talk about it again later tonight, but it's just part of it. I'll probably have a video on the draft coming up, just general talk. Because at this point, Jacksonville is eliminated from the playoffs. I guess I could do a whole video on that if I wanted, but it's official. And we got to talk, what's going to happen? Is this team going to get the first overall pick? What can they do with it? And obviously our biggest question with the draft is how do you get Travis Hunter and get draft picks? That's going to be the big thing we're all trying to answer all offseason, unless, you're still a Will Campbell guy for some reason. But I don't think there's many left at this point with Walker Little getting extended. So that's all we got. But I appreciate y'all coming here. Want to shout out our channel members, Premier Seer 904, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, and Brian Foster. Thank you all for joining me. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure to join the show tonight if you can. And finally, go Jags.